If you enjoy my content, please subscribe to my channel. Hi friends, thank you all for tuning in for another video about Shenzhen. For those of you who have been watching several of my previous videos, I am happy to announce that I have moved back home. I am no longer living in the student dormitory with my baby. We are back home in our apartment, the same apartment that I had given you a tour of in the two previous videos ago. There is still a bit of renovation noise, but it's bearable. It's definitely not as bad as it was 2 to 3 weeks ago. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that you may find to be quite expensive in Shenzhen city. Now, I've been living in China for 4 years, and 3 of those 4 years I've spent in Shenzhen city. This does not make me an expert on budgeting or accounting or economics, but I think that I am in some ways qualified to speak on the matter based on my experience as someone who purchases goods and pays for services. So, quick disclaimer, this is all based on my experience, this is all my opinion. Nevertheless, I think it could be useful for those of you who are considering moving to Shenzhen to have an idea of how much you would spend for the services and products that I'm going to be speaking about in this video. The minimum that you can expect to pay for rent in Shenzhen is about 3,000 RMB for a 1-bedroom apartment. Not a studio, a 1-bedroom apartment. But depending on the district, 3,000 RMB might be the minimum for a studio apartment. Now, when I say that the rent is expensive in Shenzhen, what I mean is that it's expensive relative to the smaller cities in China. So in the city from which I came in a couple years ago, that was a smaller city. In that city, 3,000 RMB may have gotten you a 2 to 3 bedroom apartment. Whereas in Shenzhen, there's no way that you're going to find a 2-bedroom apartment that's spacious and livable for 3,000 RMB. There's just no way. For an understanding of the cost of some of the apartments, here's an example of the apartments advertised by an agent who advertises apartments specifically in Nanshan. So this definitely is something to consider when moving to Shenzhen. What I've found is that people often choose to live in a district that's different from the district in which they work, which ultimately results in a longer travel time, more travel costs, but the rent might be cheaper compared to living in the same district as where you work. The point is, it's good to keep in mind that 3,000 might be the minimum cost for a 1-bedroom apartment in Shenzhen. Alcohol at a bar or a restaurant tends to be quite expensive in Shenzhen city. I was really surprised to find how much money I would spend at a bar in Shenzhen compared to the city I had come from. At a bar in Shenzhen, it's unlikely that you'll be paying less than 70 RMB for a cocktail. The bars that my partner and I used to frequent would only have cocktails on the menu that were 88 RMB and up. Nothing cheaper than 88 RMB. And this is the norm over here in Shenzhen. So after a night out with your friends at a bar, excluding food, you could expect to pay just under 1,000 or just over 1,000 RMB for your entire night out. Coffee is not always expensive in Shenzhen, but if you're going to an international coffee shop like Starbucks, which is a pretty big brand over here, you could find at least 2 Starbuckses on every block. There's just too many Starbuckses here. But Starbucks is quite pricey. It's about 36 RMB for 1 cup of coffee, and honestly, I've been to better coffee shops in Shenzhen that have better beans, but Starbucks is just ridiculously expensive. So this is just something to keep in mind if you're a coffee lover and if you're a loyal patron of Starbucks. Dining out or ordering in doesn't have to be expensive in Shenzhen. If you're ordering local food or Chinese food, it's generally quite affordable and really delicious. I really enjoy Chinese food. So much so that we're starting to cook Chinese meals in our home. It's generally affordable, but if you're looking for a Western or European meal, so let's say burgers, pizza, I don't know, maybe dining out at a French restaurant or a German restaurant, it can get really expensive. Even McDonald's here is quite pricey. And the same goes for imported foods and products. Usually you would have to contact an independent seller who will import the goods, and you're going to be paying a pretty penny to have these goods imported, not necessarily because of the imported costs or the costs of importing the goods, but because it is a novel item and it's usually something that's only in demand amongst the expats, and obviously sellers will take advantage of this phenomenon. Now, the public transport operation or system in Shenzhen is incredible. It's seamless, it's convenient, but it does require effort and energy. You have to wake up earlier in the morning, and sometimes in the morning you don't really want to be on a crowded train or on a train wherein you have to switch to different trains midway through your journey. Sometimes you just don't feel like it. So if you choose to travel via private transport, it's definitely something you would have to budget for, especially if you're going to be using private transport in the mornings and the afternoons, 5 days a week. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning, most people in Shenzhen City live and work in different districts, which means you have to travel. You're probably going to need a car or take the train, and you're probably going to be traveling for 20 to 50 minutes one way. Now, the application that we use for private travel is called Didi. There are several other applications that I'm just now becoming familiar with because they actually tend to be cheaper. But if we're going with Didi, which I would say is the harbinger app of private transport in Shenzhen or in China in general, the base fare is around 15 RMB. It's broken down like this. This is an example of how much I could expect to pay if I'm going from home to work. And these costs start to add up. Now, I live in Baoan district, and most of the scenic spots and fancy restaurants happen to be in Nanshan district or Futian district, and that's about 30 to 40 minutes away. So I'm going to be paying 50 RMB minimum per car that I order. Obviously, the taxis are also metered, and those costs add up. Sometimes the taxis turn out to be more expensive. There is a way around this though, buying coupons. So as you can see here, I bought a collection of coupons and it has lowered my cost dramatically. It's cut my cost in half almost. So there are ways around it, but this is just something to keep in mind. When you move to Shenzhen, travel will cost a pretty penny. It will cost you something. But if you're an early bird, if you don't mind people early in the morning, or you don't mind a crowded train in the evening, then the public transport would work perfectly for you. It's cheap, it's safe, so I guess it just comes down to preference. Obviously, Chinese brands are prolific over here in Shenzhen. They are cheap, usually good quality, and accessible, meaning they can be ordered online to be delivered within the next 20 minutes, or you can just go down the street and find a shop where you can buy clothes or plastic or cookware, etc. However, international brands are expensive. Look, I didn't really indulge in international brands back home, back in South Africa, so I can't really compare the costs. I can't really say if they are expensive, but they're expensive from like a Chinese RMB point of view. So international brands like, I don't know, like Apple products, Nike, Adidas, Skechers, not just clothes, but also electronics, cookware. The international brands tend to be a lot more expensive than the same product that's a Chinese brand. Fortunately, in China, what I've noticed, I don't want to generalize, but what I've noticed is that people don't care too much for brands over here. As long as you're going about your day, working, contributing to the economy, no one really cares about the logo on your shirt. So I feel that there is a lot less pressure in this country to indulge in brands that don't really mean anything other than, you know, a logo that someone has said is important. If you're planning on allowing your child an international education, and when I say international, I mean a school that is bilingual, so they will be learning English and Chinese. They will be taught in English and have some classes in Chinese. This is what I mean by international education. The schools are expensive. You can expect to pay 150,000 to, I would say, 350,000 per annum, and that excludes lunches, that excludes dormitories, that excludes transport, etc. This is what you can expect to pay. But the curriculums and, how do I call it, the general program, the infrastructure at these international schools are exquisite. And the teachers that are hired are definitely going through a more rigorous hiring process than a regular public school. So your child will be getting quality education at a higher cost, of course. Now, there's no need to be paying for private healthcare. Most expats would pay for private healthcare only because private healthcare usually has an international department whereby you can see a doctor who speaks English. This is obviously very important when it comes to your health and or ailments, right? So most expats would only opt for private healthcare if they're looking for a doctor who speaks in English. The public healthcare over here, however, is magnificent, convenient, accessible, affordable, and most of the time the staff are friendly. If you're choosing public healthcare, just be ready with a translator. Otherwise, everything should be okay. The costs are, I would say, sometimes 10 times less than private healthcare. The hospital that I frequent, especially now that I have a baby, we have to visit the pediatrician once, sometimes twice a month. We're only using this private healthcare because our baby's health is very important to us, and being able to understand what's going well or what's not going well regarding our baby is very important to us. But the consultation fees and the vaccination fees really do add up, so be prepared for that. At the same time, the public healthcare system is wonderful. Just be prepared with some kind of translation software, which you can usually use your phone for. I suppose this might go without saying, but yeah, international hotels are very expensive. International hotels like the Hilton, the Four Seasons, the Ritz-Carlton, the Marriott, Crown Plaza, and the Westin. These are just some examples of some international hotels. You're usually going to be paying around 700 to 1,500 RMB per night for, let's say, 2 adults. The cheaper hotels are not bad, actually. They're clean, they're sanitary. The staff is actually more friendly at the smaller hotels. I found the cheaper hotels. But there are some luxuries that the international hotels offer that you can't find at the smaller hotels, obviously, some of those being amenities and I guess the comfort of the furniture. But yeah, international hotels, you're definitely gonna have to fork out quite a bit. But at the same time, just like with the private public healthcare thing that I just spoke about, the smaller, cheaper hotels are just as excellent. Especially if you're just traveling to the city and you only need a place to sleep. I would rather pay for a hotel that goes for about 170 RMB per night than something like the Hilton, But if it's like, a once in a while kind of splurge thing, it's nice because the fancy hotels also tend to have bathtubs, which I think is something that a lot of people look for. But otherwise, it's really down to personal preference and your budget, but just be aware. For some reason, cherries and strawberries are sold for exorbitant amounts of money over here, especially during the Chinese New Year. Of course, in China, and maybe all over the world, I'm not sure, but in China, red is a very auspicious color. So perhaps that has something to do with it, but unfortunately I am not able to satiate my craving for cherries because I'm just not willing to pay that amount of money for a punnet of cherries. I'm just not doing that. Lastly, but certainly not least, I think I will make another video with some more products and services that you can expect to be expensive. But lastly, nail salons and spas also tend to be quite pricey. Also, this is subjective. Obviously, my pricey is not the same as your pricey, but I've been living here for a while, so I know how affordable things can be. So when things are not affordable, it stands out like a sore thumb, all right? I have not yet been to a nail salon where the service costed less than 150 RMB. Now I will say that the nail technicians tend to be very attentive and meticulous, so I guess you're paying for that service, but just be aware that you're going to pay quite a bit of money. I actually find that the nail salons back home might be cheaper than the ones over here. Spas are also quite expensive, but I think this might be a precedent everywhere in the world. But the Thai spa that I do enjoy going to every now and then would cost about, I would say 250 minimum for maybe like 30 minutes. So it's definitely something that you have to plan for in advance. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and that you found it informative, especially those of you who are planning to move to Shenzhen. If you are, please comment down below. Let me know where you're going to be living. Let me know if you have any questions or if you need advice, or if you just want to chat about the city, that's great too. Please let me know. Once again, everything that I've mentioned in this video is just based on my own experience, based on my own interpretation of affordable and expensive. Nevertheless, I hope that you found this enlightening. Please take care of yourself. Have an excellent week. Bye-bye.